It is not true. We are
See, there it
abhorred
is.
by
There it is.
the
Perfect.
murder of them.
Under your insane standard, I would be kicked out of the country because they say among the different definitions of anti-Semitism is denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So that is not about Jews, that's about Israel.
I would support the same exact statement against Muslims.
No, you wouldn't, because so here's the situation. Literally every Israeli supporter in their actions say that Palestine shouldn't exist. So should we throw them all out? Beyond absurd. There's only one country that gets to say, if you criticize Israel, you'll be deported from America. And I hate it, I loathe it. And all of your excuses are insane.
You are just full of illogical inconsistencies where you jump.
So let me get this straight. If you're a foreign student in the US and dare to criticize one government on this planet, suddenly you're public enemy #1. But if you trash Muslims, scream death to Islam, or post Islamic phobic filth online, no problem. Welcome to America, land of selective outrage and weaponized morality. In this fury TYT showdown, Cenk Uygur absolutely rips apart the double standards inflicting our politics and legal systems. He exposes how criticizing Israel is now being falsely labeled as anti-Semitism, conveniently used to deport students and silent dissent. While bigotry against Muslims, Christians, or even Americans itself is largely shrugged off, this isn't about fighting hate, it's about protecting one country at the expense of free speech, logic, and constitutional rights. And let's not even forget, this entire circus is unfolding on college campuses, the very birthplace of protest and open discourse. Cenk's not just defending Palestine, he's defending the soul of American democracy. Buckle up, this one's going nuclear. Let's go.
Anti-Semitism, that's not anything to do with Israel.
Okay, so let's take it one by one. So I'm gonna disprove that in a second, but first, let's just give it to them for the sake of argument and say that it's genuinely not about Israel and they're really concerned about anti-Semitism. So one question at a time on it, Ben. So why are we only concerned about anti-Semitism? Why aren't we scouring social media posts to find out if people hate America or Christianity or Islam? I mean, certainly there's millions of comments that are Islamophobic, and certainly on college campuses, there's gotta be thousands upon thousands. So why only anti-Semitism?
They should be doing it for any hate speech entirely, because being here is a privilege and not a right if you're not an American citizen. But there is an unbelievable rise in anti-Semitism, so it's appropriate to focus on that. There can be some times when we focus on the rising problem, we can sometimes, as a nation collectively, protect Jewish people who are under attack.
So don't you think that there's an incredible rise of Islamophobia as well?
I don't see that on par at all.
You don't. Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
No, I don't.
Number two, you know that being
massive protests on our campuses against the Islamic community or against the Muslim community.
No, the counter-protesters. The counter-protesters say the most vicious anti-Muslim rhetoric. There's no consequences at all. Apparently, that's perfectly okay. So number two, you know that saying things that are anti-Semitic are perfectly constitutional. And you know that the Constitution applies to non-citizens. So how is this in any way constitutional?
The Constitution may apply, but not all constitutional protections for citizens apply to non-citizens. Quite obviously also, being here is a privilege. You don't get to have a student visa if you chant death to America and you advocate for the end of America. And then you said, why not the US? This bill this policy also does attack or target people that are anti-American as well.
They mention it once in passing. The whole thing's about anti-Semitism. Theoretically,
but the bill is about the physical. But the bill is about the physical harassment of Jewish individuals and people supporting terrorist activities and terrorist organizations.
You know the two people
100%.
The two people they've rounded up so far were, one of them spoke out against anti-Semitism. They have no evidence of anti-Semitism. They've already got 300 people on a list. They have no evidence of supporting Hamas or terrorism. All they have is, well, they criticize Israel or they were pro-Palestine. Do you really, really think that out of the 1.5 million people, they're actually looking for people who did violence? Because if they did violence, they should be arrested. That's not a question. Everybody agrees to that. No, they're looking for criticism of Israel. It's super obvious. And it's unconstitutional. Even if they said death to America, which I hate, I don't want people saying that. It's still protected by the First Amendment. And if you're in America, you are protected by the First Amendment, no matter what your citizenship status is. So now we're gonna trash it on behalf of a foreign government. This is absurd.
No, I think that's fully ridiculous what you're saying there. I 100% agree with you that you should not be having your status revoked or deported if you are simply supporting a free Palestine. I support a free Palestine. We need this in the world deeply. I support the rights to protest for the Palestinian people, for an end to the war, protest against the Israeli government. All of that is wonderful and very American behavior. I do not think that you should be able to stay in this country or have your application to come here approved if you are chanting death to America, or if you're chanting for the end of the Jewish state, or if you're supporting Hamas.
Okay.
And
so if
I
you're
grant
saying
you 100%.
Yeah. So you're saying, you just said it, if you're talking about the Jewish state, Israel, you shouldn't be allowed in this country. That's insane. How about if they chanted death to Erdogan or Turkey, or they say that the Turkish government shouldn't exist, it should be Armenia, Greece, etc. Should we block them? Turkey's a super important ally. Should we block them from coming into the country?
What I'm saying to you is the call for Israel to not exist is different than speaking against Erdogan's government. You can speak, I already said it twice, against the Israeli government all that you want, but calling for the destruction or eradication of the Israel state is calling for the annihilation of the Jewish people
how about
and half
this,
of the global population.
So
that's different. I would support the same exact statement against Muslims.
No, you wouldn't, because so here's the situation. Literally every Israeli supporter in their actions say that Palestine shouldn't exist. So should we throw them all out? Any Israeli or any Israeli supporter that says Palestine shouldn't exist and there shouldn't be two states, we throw the bums out?
You said every Israeli supporter says Palestine shouldn't exist. That's a blatant lie. That's
no,
not true
that's
in your.
I said in your actions. In your actions, are you?
How so?
Because you say that the occupation should continue. Why shouldn't they be an independent state right now?
Have never in a million years said the occupation should continue. I've said a million times that the Palestinian people need a government that accepts a peace plan, and
in other
many
words,
that they've been offered and need to get rid of.
If, but right now they shouldn't exist. But if they pass all of your absurd tests, maybe they could exist at a much later time. But you get to stay, everybody gets to stay that believes that. Everybody who says that Muslims should be wiped out and they're all Nazis, etc. Everybody gets to stay unless you criticize one particular set of people. Ben, how do you not see that this is going to drive more anti-Semitism rather than less anti-Semitism?
Absurd tests to you literally are simply they stop promising to kill all of the Jewish people in Israel, therefore more than half of the global population
That is not the test
of Jews
at all.
can live in peace.
Absurd. And how about this? How about all the Israeli supporters that don't mind the 50,000 people that are murdered in Gaza? Well, that's wiping out people. That's literally, and that did actually happen. It's not theoretical. It's not at a later time. It already happened. So calling for the murder of all those people, perfectly fine. One thing you cannot criticize in this country, Israel. And so why is it Israel and not Jews overall? So according to the absurd definition,
that's another thing that you always conflate. That's another thing you always conflate, Cenk. You act as though somehow people that want the existential promise and threat and constant effort to annihilate us, you say that we are, that the people on that side are totally okay with the murder of Palestinians. That is libel. That is not true. We are abhorred by the murder of them.
Under your insane standard, I would be kicked out of the country because they say among the different definitions of anti-Semitism is denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So that is not about Jews, that's about Israel. That's about Israel, okay? Number two, and there's 7 of these, I'm only gonna read 3.
The only Jewish
Hold on, let me read them,
yes,
let me read them. Applying double standards by requiring it of a behavior not expected or demand of any other democratic nation, 100% about Israel, not about Jews. Number 3, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis. So whenever you talk about the 15 to 20,000 children murdered in Gaza, they say, oh, blood libel, blood libel. Okay, that's it, deport him, deport him. You can't criticize Israel. This is definitely a definition that is meant to protect Israel above all other countries. And to say that the American government serves Norway and France and Canada and Israel equally and America equally is beyond absurd. There's only one country that gets to say, if you criticize Israel, you'll be deported from America. And I hate it, I loathe it. And all of your excuses are insane.
You are just full of illogical inconsistencies where you jump. You're saying that people who claim that Israel should not exist, that yet again is because it's the only Jewish state on planet Earth, that is the call for the annihilation of the Jewish people and the call for the annihilation of any people.
I don't believe, look, first of all, I don't agree with that stance, but that's not what it means. So first of all, when people say there should be one state, you could interpret that to mean that Israel should not exist. That doesn't mean you murder everyone there. Now, I don't agree with a one-state solution, and I believe Israel should exist, and I believe it should be a safe haven for Jews. But if somebody says, I think there should be one state, kicking him out of the country for their opinion on Israel? Come on, Ben. How is that about anti-Semitism? That's 100% about protecting Israel and only Israel.
Because it's the only safe haven on planet Earth for Jewish people.
No, America's a safe haven. America's a safe haven.
Where is? America's a safe haven?
Yes.
You're sitting here literally saying that we shouldn't have policies that stop physical harassment of Jewish people.
I did not say that at all. You do physical harassment, that's against the law. And I would definitely rule against it. That's breaking a law. No, this is looking at 1.5 million people's social media to say if they said anything against Israel, which will then interpret as anti-Semitism. You're going with the most extreme example. That's not what they're looking for. Any critique of Israel will do it. And in fact, we have no idea what they're charging those 300 people they've already targeted. And the 2 people that we know for sure that have already been arrested and they're trying to deport said nothing that was anti-Semitic.
So that's where I totally agree with you. Of course, they need to be presenting the evidence, and it's total garbage for them to be detaining and or deporting anybody without presenting the evidence. But that's a different argument than saying you get to be in America on the privilege of a student visa or a temporary green card to be here and be actively working against American interests, or working against what America stands for, actively talking against our allies no matter where they are, and actively calling
our
for
allies?
the annihilation
Saudi Arabia is
of the
an
Jewish
ally.
people.
Should we kick out anybody criticizing Saudi Arabia? And they're a Muslim state. They're a Muslim state.
If they say Saudi Arabia should be wiped off the planet, you should not be granted staying here in America.
What if they say Saudi Arabia should not exist as it is currently constituted? That doesn't mean killing the Saudis. It means getting rid of their dictatorship.
Right, speaking against the government is different than speaking against a nation. Once again, but if you speak directly against the against the nation, and so. If you seem for some reason to conflate, you always conflate the fact that we are in a war with the fact that somehow the Israeli people or Jewish people want that war or are okay with that. You also continually cite all the time over and over again the numbers of dead, while I don't know, I guess quite intentionally not mentioning that close to half of that are the terrorists, and that in any war there's collateral damage. Of course, you specifically don't mention it.
Even the IDF doesn't make up that bad. The IDF is not outrageous enough to pretend that half of them was Hamas. First of all, 60% of them are women and children. Okay, do you believe that they should stop bombing them right now, Ben?
That on the air. They recently quietly revised those numbers and reduced the amount of children that they claim Hamas claims was dead. You didn't cover that on the air. You also, for some reason, didn't cover all the weeks now of protests against Hamas in Gaza. So there's protests in Gaza that for some reason you're choosing not to cover. Yet when people here are supporting
funding Hamas.
That is something that should be protected.
We're funding Israel. What? We're not funding Hamas. We're funding Israel. We're not deporting people because they disagree with Palestinians. We're deporting people because they've made the grave, grave crime of disagreeing with beloved, almighty Israel, who we should all bow down to, because Israel first, America 18th. So, Ben, it is inarguable that this does not apply to any other nation on earth. There is one nation that is so powerful that it could force America to trash its own constitution, to get any critic of Israel outside this country. And denying that is just simply denying reality.
No, that is quite the opposite. It's the only nation that is a safe haven for Jews, and nobody ever here is attacking the existence of 22 Arab nations surrounding Israel, the 7 nations constantly attacking Israel. And so when our ally is under constant attack and people want to come to this country and trash that nation and say it should not exist and that safe haven should be removed and compares them to Nazis, that is a very grave danger for Jews here in America. And your inclination to not want to protect that and say you don't get to be in America if you're going to have that position against the one place on earth that is protecting Jews, that is inarguably
are they protecting
anti-Semitic and real
while
garbage.
Protecting Jews, by the way, we're going to slaughter tens of thousands of Palestinians. Slaughter and slaughter them and take half their land. They're already occupying half of Gaza. I told you they were going to go steal the land. Are you ever going to admit that the whole point was to actually steal the land and that they're in the middle of occupying 50% of Gaza now? Are you ever going to admit that, or is there no occupation? No, golly gee, this was just, a year and a half after October 7th, they're still slaughtering children today. Oh, I'm sorry, that was blood libel. Kick me out, kick me out. How dare I say anything wrong against the beloved government of Israel? Well, didn't I know this is America where freedom of speech doesn't exist anymore if you criticize Israel?
Did you admit that it in fact was not ethnic cleansing, like you promised me on air you would admit?
100% ethnic cleansing.
And they were allowed.
100. Are you claiming it's not ethnic
return to the north?
Are you claiming it's not ethnic cleansing when they're pushed all the Palestinians in Gaza to a small area in Gaza? They've occupied half the land. That's the definition of ethnic cleansing, Ben.
And then they've been allowed to return to the north, to their homes.
Yeah, they've cut off the food for the last 5 weeks, starving them to death from this beloved nation of Israel. It's turned into a grotesque terrorist nation. We shouldn't spend a single dollar, and we shouldn't bow down to them and just start getting rid of our First Amendment just because, it makes Netanyahu angry. Get him out, get him out.
Have you ever heard of nations
he ordered
at war
Biden,
being responsible for
and all
the
I ever do is listen to Netanyahu's orders.
Have you ever heard of a nation at war being responsible for the aid to that nation? Why aren't you yelling at Egypt with their 7-layer border wall to bring in aid into the Palestinian people? Because you don't care if it's not Jewish
reality,
people.
Egypt is occupying Gaza.
Cenk didn't just win the debate, he exposed the whole game. The second you criticize you know who, boom, you're labeled anti-Semitic and suddenly not welcome in the land of the free. Meanwhile, people can post the most vile anti-Muslim, anti-Christian, anti-anything, hate smear, and call for the erasure of Palestine and nothing happens. No deportations, no hearings, no outrage, just crickets. Cenk called it for what it is, a political double standard dressed up as national security. He defended free speech, basic human rights, the First Amendment, and the idea that you shouldn't get kicked out of a country for standing up against an occupation or injustice. Ben, on the other hand, bent over backwards to justify censorship and protect one foreign government above all others. Let's be real, if this was about hate speech, we'd see the same crackdown across the board, but we didn't. It's selective, it's political, and it's dangerous. If you believe free speech should apply to everyone, not just those defending the right side, smash that like button and drop a comment below. Should criticizing a foreign government ever be grounds of deportation in America? I want to hear from you, so let's make some noise in the comments. Catch you on the next one.